Can anyone tell me who that guy is on the screen? It's not Kurtley Beale. So anyone tell me who that is? I know the picture's slightly distorted so you can see the words better, but can anyone guess? Yeah, Usain Bolt, fastest man in the world, 9.58 seconds in 100. He's lightning, he is quick. And I love athletics, and so I thought to base my whole message today on that. A couple of weeks ago, I was doing training at the athletics track, and one of my friends was coaching a couple of rugby players. And so it was early in the morning, I just did a leg workout, and I went out on the track to just do a couple of steps and run around the track a little bit and then cool down. And so these guys were doing 400 meters, and as I said to the leaders the other day, I thought it was a little bit too late, but they were doing 400 meters, these Taniwha players, and so they were kind of, I don't know if they were developing players, I wasn't sure, but they were running after her. Now this friend of mine, she's also a coach, and she does long distance running. That's what she does, and she's pretty good in it. And so they were running and doing these 400 meters and then having minimum recovery in between. I think it was like a minute and a half or 2 minutes, and then they would go again, 400 after 400 after 400. And she would just keep her pace, but one of the guys, he was struggling like really, really badly. The other guy kind of kept up with her, but they were just going and going and going. I kind of felt for them, to be honest. And at some stage I was walking around the track, and so they were coming around the track, and I still remember just hearing her shout from the back, "Come on guys, stride frequency," which in athletics terms usually means, keep the pace, keep your pace, or pick up the pace. You've got to keep your stride frequency, just maintain it. But these guys were just out of it, but they just went for it, and it was all good. I took my hat off to them. They were really, really, doing well. But as I was walking around the track, this image of her just encouraging these guys to run and me recovering and cooling down from my workout, I kind of had this passage in 1 Corinthians 9 come to mind, these very known words of the Apostle Paul, where he uses this idea in athletics and also in boxing, talking about the spiritual race, talking about us, how we run for an eternal prize versus a fixed prize, or a prize that we win here, like at a track event. And so he uses this analogy of how we should discipline ourselves and run to win and run with purpose and those sort of things. And I went home and I read it, and it just inspired me to talk to these leaders about this particular idea, because as leaders we sometimes need that little bit of encouragement and coaching, so to speak. But then I thought, well, I'm going to come and share this with you guys too, because it doesn't just only apply to leaders and ministers. This very much applies to all of us, because the fact is all of us are running a spiritual race throughout our lives. All of us are. And now whether you know it or not, or whether you think of yourself as an athlete or not, the point is you're in a sense a spiritual athlete. And so that's why I'm dressed like an athlete today. It's not necessarily to support the All Blacks, that too. But this is my athletics shirt and my pants that I usually use in winter. And ultimately I thought to come and be sort of an spiritual athletic coach for you guys this morning. Because if we want to win a race in real life, win a race, whatever it is that you're running, and I brought something to show you. Like last year, I competed at the Tauranga at the Nationals Masters Track and Field, and I got 2 of these gold medals for the 100 and the 60 meters, and so I thought about the victory that I had there and the times that I ran, and I wanted to improve on them. But as I thought about this, I realized the amount of work that went into it to kind of get that, and even to improve this year to maintain that, because there's a faster guy now in the scene, and I have to challenge this guy and get that gold medal, retain it. I realized the amount of work that went into it. And so when the Apostle Paul talks in 1 Corinthians 9 about this idea of training like an athlete in our spiritual race, I realized that is, if that's true for me, winning a gold medal, running 100 or running a 60 or running a 5K or whatever it is I'm running, just think how much more does that apply to my spiritual race as I run through life. So I can't just show up like at a track event and kind of hope to win. I have to really put in the hard yards beforehand to get the result. That is equally true for my spiritual race. But many of us as Christians often just show up, so to speak, at our spiritual race and we hope to do okay. We hope to get the gold medal. But it doesn't work like that. There's a few things that you and I need to put into it consistently and constantly. If I want to have a good performance and I want to compete and I want to keep winning those type of things, I need to put in the hard yards. And that is true for our spiritual life also. And so after I reflected on this whole idea, the question I want to think about today is, how do I run a victorious spiritual race? That's really so I'm going to use athletics and the analogy of athletics quite a bit, but it's very much focused not on actual athletics, but on this idea of how to run a victorious spiritual race, how to win in terms of my spiritual journey in life. And so here's the passage in 1 Corinthians 9 that inspired me to come up with this teaching I want to share with you this morning, that I shared with a couple of guys the other day also. The Apostle Paul says, when he writes to the Corinthians, he writes these few words, and he says, "Don't you realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize?" Now sometimes there is sort of a line finish, and they have to look at it, but ultimately only one person gets the prize. That's how it works. Unfortunately, that's the hard thing about sports. There's a winner and there's a loser. Just go and ask the Wallabies today. There's a winner and there's a loser. Just how it works in sports. So don't you realize that in a race, when you line up and you've got 7 other people in the 8-lane race, there's only going to be one person that wins that race. So ultimately, as he says, run to win. Don't go and line up in a race hoping to come second or hoping to come last. When you line up for this race like an athlete, run to win. That is the goal, the mindset, the attitude that you should have as a person that runs the spiritual race. Run to win. But he also says all athletes are disciplined in their training. Well, athletes that do well are disciplined in their training, but we'll talk about that later. They do it to win the prize that will fade away. See, this gold medal will eventually fade away. This will become meaningless. In fact, if I come second this year, this will be meaningless, because I want another one. So athletes run to win a prize like this. But this prize will fade away. But you see, you and I do it for an eternal prize, as the Apostle Paul says there. So I run, he says, I run with purpose in every step that I take. So he doesn't just run purposelessly, he runs with purpose. He wants to win that prize. I discipline my body like an athlete. It goes through the hardship, the training, the preparation, everything. Training it to do what it should, to ultimately run with purpose and run to win. And then he goes on to say that he doesn't want to end up being somebody that preaches and then find himself being disqualified because he's been talking so much but he didn't do a lot of training and running himself, and be found disqualified at the end of the day. So this is a powerful passage, and I want to share with you a couple of lessons that I've learned from this. And basically, what I've learned from this is 6 lessons or applications for how to run a victorious spiritual race. And I'm just going to put all 6 on the screen for you, and then I'm going to break it down and share with you a couple of thoughts that I had on these. And I hope that you'll be served through 1 or 2 of them. Here's the first one, getting from this passage. The Apostle Paul says that ultimately I've got to run to win, and I've got to run with purpose in every step, because that's what he does. He disciplines his body to run this race. So the first requirement, if I want to run a victorious spiritual race, it's the same as when I run an actual race here on earth, is I need to show up with the right vision and the right attitude. I'll tell you a story quickly, right? A couple of years ago, I'm going to talk about quite a few years ago, I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I did athletics for 1 season after school. And this particular day I was at uni, and I was running for their track and field team. And this particular year there was all these Grand Prix track and field events going around the world. And so they went from country to country, and it was South Africa's turn, and so they came to Stellenbosch where I studied. And so all these guys at that stage, there was a guy by the name of Otto Bolden, I think, was the main runner. He and another guy, Morne Nagel, they were the South African guy, they were kind of in a rivalry with each other. They went to all these Grand Prix things all around the world, and they would run against each other, and it was always one or two, number 1 or 2 in every race. And so they went around the world doing that. They also thought that Morne would be the first guy to run, white guy to run the 100 under 10 seconds. He got close, but he didn't do it. And when they came to Stellenbosch to run, the customers, when they go to the local track they would usually have an A, B, C, or depending on how many heats there are, races. And then the fastest guy would run in the A race, and the slower times would B race, and so on and so on and so on. So we had about, I think, two or three races, and the customers to usually use local athletes to fill up the lanes if they didn't have enough enough athletes to run against these professional guys. These are professional athletes. And so I got picked from my club to run in one of these races, in the B race. My times weren't quite in the 10 seconds, or not the low 10s anyway. So I got to run against some of these really fast guys, professional athletes. I was completely out of depth, to be honest. Completely. I was a student, for goodness sake, and my life consisted out of takeaways and drinking and training athletics. And so, not drinking that much, just by the way, since I'm on record here. But and so I got picked to run against these guys, and it was a great honor and so. But here's something that I picked up when I got to that event. I saw some of these American and Jamaican and at that stage there was quite a few guys from Trinidad and Tobago, all these fast athletes from those islands. These guys would show up. Now, some of these guys weren't household names in athletics by any means. They were good athletes, but not by, not like world contenders by any means. But something I picked up immediately when you were around these guys just warming up, me being a student, just, doing it for fun and having all my mates in the stands, being around some of these professional guys, they all showed up with the attitude that I'm here to win this race. You couldn't help but being around these guys and help but feel that there was this energy oozing from these guys, that the way that they walked, they had this bit of a swagger in their walk, and the way that they just held themselves amongst the crowd and stuff. These guys had an absolute belief that they're here to mean business. They're here to run this race with conviction. And so when the Apostle Paul says, look, when we line up for the race, one is going to win the prize, the spiritual race. So don't run to come second, don't run to come last, run to win, run with purpose in every step that you take, run with purpose. And I think it starts with this idea that before you and I, long before we turn up in our spiritual race, you and I need to have this right vision, this belief that I'm actually going to run with the right intent. And also run with that attitude. No wonder the Apostle Paul wrote a few times in his letters to people, let the Holy Spirit come and change your mind and change your attitude. Because it is vital for our spiritual race. I meet so many Christians, and I know I've been there, and some days I'm still like that, where my attitude just absolutely sucks. To be honest with you, where my attitude is not conducive for the spiritual race that God wants me to run. My attitude is determined by something else or someone else or circumstances or something that happened or something that's going to happen, and it takes my focus of what's really true, that I'm actually running for a prize that is eternal, not for something that's going to fade away. And therefore, I've got to make sure that I turn up with the right vision for my life, the vision that of what God, the vision God has for my life, and also the attitude that goes with that. There's a vital thing. I've met so many Christians in my life. They go to every Bible study. They sit in church every Sunday morning. They know all the songs. They can play guitar and play the piano, and they're great serving people. But they don't have a great vision for their life, or they don't have an attitude that serves that vision. They're always, with their head in the ground, and they go through life like that. The Apostle Paul says, no, if you want to run to win, run with intent, run with purpose, turn up with the right attitude and vision, to make that happen. It's vital. It's vital. Maybe the only thing that's keeping you back from running well right now in your life spiritually is that your attitude and your vision isn't big enough, or it's not helpful enough for you to run that race. And you've got to do something about it, and I'm going to give you a couple of ideas of how to do that today. The second one is, that I thought about when I reflected on these words of the Apostle Paul, is that in order to run to win, in order to actually turn up and do well in the race, in our spiritual race, I need to know what race I'm actually running in. So I shared this with the ministers the other day, and I said, you know what, I'm a sprinter. And I do short stuff. That's what I train for. So it's all about explosiveness. It's all about out of the blocks, really fast. 60 meters, 100 meters, it's over and done with. Now imagine my surprise if I turn up one day training and having been, having trained in that way, and they tell me you're going to do a 400 meter. So, just imagine my surprise. Or they're going to tell me, now today you're going to run a 5K run. Just imagine my surprise. I've been training my muscles and my lungs and everything to run a short, fast race. Now I have to do a 400 meter, which requires endurance and all these type of things. I'm going to be out of my depth. I'll probably come last by a huge mile. But isn't it funny that sometimes in our spiritual lives we do the same thing? We're not aware of the season that we're in spiritually. We're not aware of what we're actually facing and what we're dealing with right now. And so we sometimes, we go about running the spiritual race like sprinters, whereas the race is actually a 5K run. And what's actually required is a little bit more endurance, a little bit more patience, a little bit more waiting, a little bit more strategy. But now I want to sprint through life. And you, at some point, run out of steam, you run out of energy, you run out of enthusiasm, you run out of, just belief that God's, in this with you. Whatever happens to us, because we didn't realize that we were in a completely different race. I've learned in my own spiritual life that sometimes we're in a desert time, and a desert time is usually a time where it's sort of a 10K run, and you've got to be patient. You've got to wait your time. You've got to pace yourself. You've got to just trust in the Lord and just wait for the breakthroughs to come. But you see, there's other times when it's about a sprint. It's about fast. It's about you've got to act now. You've got to, when the door's open, walk through the door that God's given you. You can't go about that short sprint like a 5K runner in that season. You've got to go for it. You can't wait, because often those opportunities pass. So if you and I want to run to win and run with purpose in this spiritual race, we've got to know what race we're running in. So my question is, are you running the appropriate race for the season that you're in right now in your life? Because we're all in different seasons. We're all in different races. You're not in a sprint like I am. I might not be in an endurance race like you are. But if you want to be smart, if you want to condition yourself, like the Apostle Paul says, spiritually condition yourself, discipline yourself, you've got to know what you're running in. What are you running in? And are you running that race appropriately? Do you have the right support? Do you have the right training? All those things are important, and I'll give you some examples, in a moment. But just first of all, think about this question. What race are you in? And perhaps part of your frustration is you've been running the wrong race in the wrong way. There's a saying that I learned many years ago from a life coach who said that you can do the right thing at the wrong time and still end up with pain. And I think that's very, very true, is that you and I can run the right type of race in the wrong race and end up with a bad result. What race are you running in? Third principle that I thought about as I reflected on this idea of athletics and running a spiritual race is that you and I must train well to perform well. I had a rugby coach always who said that you play on Saturday the way you train on Thursday, and I think there's sort of a saying in the rugby board like that, but it's true. In order for me to perform well, I've got to train well. The Apostle Paul says a few times in that passage, he says, as all athletes are disciplined in their training. Why should that be any different for spiritual athletes? Why should it be any different for us when we run our spiritual race? If actual athletes to win these are disciplined in their training, why should it be different for us in our spiritual races to not be disciplined in our training, in our preparation? He also says that we've got to he disciplines his body. Why should it be any different for us in our spiritual race? Now, when I thought about those two ideas, I thought, well, what does that mean? What does it mean that all athletes are disciplined in their training? Well, I think it means one of three things. The one is you've got to have focus. You actually need to know where you're going and what you're training for. You need to know what you're about. You need to know what stage of life you're in. You need to know what God's doing in you need to be focused. But it also means consistency. See, you can't just train once a week and then expect to win a gold medal. It doesn't work like that in the spiritual realm either. You can't just expect to read the Bible once 365 days and kind of hope to be inspired and hope to be turned around on the inside. But yet many of us run in our spiritual lives like that. We're not consistent in our training and our discipline as Christians. It also means preparations. It means you actually need to do something. You need to put in the hard yards. I think it was Sun Tzu, one of the great philosophers, who said that he who sweats more in practice bleeds less in war. And I think that's a beautiful saying, is that's true for our spiritual lives also. If you do the sweating and the hard yards behind the scenes, when the tough things come and the challenges come and the requirements that goes with life come, then ultimately you'll be prepared for it. Discipline my body also for me means personal sacrifice. It means time on the track. It means time with weights. It means time not eating bad stuff. It means all these things. And when you and I run a spiritual race, you and I have to make personal sacrifices sometimes in order to run the race to win. So you can't continue the way that you've been doing things and expect to win. It doesn't work like that. As Christians, there's also a trap for many of us, and I'll share with you this trap in a moment. But when you think about performance and when you think about training, what is actually the most important part of training? Can anyone tell me?
Getting started.
Getting started, yeah, for sure. Second most important thing. Once you got started.
Diet.
What?
Diet.
Diet, yep, that's important. What else? Consistency, yep, that's all important. Most important thing though. Hey? Mental attitude. Perseverance. All those things are important, but here is the key that will make all those things happen and a lot easier. Recovery. Recovery. See, if you and I are athletes in a spiritual race or in a physical race, and all I do is train, it's very hard to maintain persistency and the right attitude and things. If I get to the point where I get so tired that I can't do it anymore, where I burn out. And many Christians don't build into their lives times of recovery. They're just so on the go, serving, helping, but they never get a time where they retreat. What was one of the main things that Jesus did all of the time that He ministered on earth? One of the main things we read in the Gospels. He retreated. He had time by Himself, on His own, with His Heavenly Father, where He spent time with Him. He recovered, and then He served, retreated. Why is it any different for us? Many of us as Christians go through life when we serve. It's almost like we're serving and helping and living on empty. And we step into that trap, of thinking, I'm suffering for the gospel. No, you're just not paying attention to how to run a race properly. Ultimately, you and I need to ask ourselves, what am I doing to recover? How much time do you actually take? How much time do you spend retreating? And it's just you and the Lord, just you and His Spirit, just you. Spending time allowing to be recharged so you can turn up with renewed energy and run the race again with vigor. Many of us don't do that. Trust me, it's no different for a spiritual race as it's for a physical race. A couple of months ago, actually, you can ask my wife, I was training and I thought I was being smart. And so I thought, because I was running 2 programs at once, so I thought I'll just train, and then the off days where my one program had an off day or day off, I would just do the other program, because it's a different sort of muscle group. I eventually contracted a bug that my daughter brought home from school, and I haven't had a bug in 3 years since I changed my diet. But I got that bug because I was so broken down that I was just open for all sorts of things. When you and I run our spiritual race, and we get broken down so much, we get tired so much, we never get recharged, you leave yourself open for all sorts of temptations, all sorts of things to come into your life that will distract you from this race that you're in. It's no different. Powerful idea that you might want to consider. Number 4, and I'll rush through these. Number 4 is you also need the right people around you. I started thinking about training in athletics and about this, and the Apostle Paul mentions this other times. He talks about the body and the members and so on. And I thought this principle is true for your spiritual race and my spiritual race too. In order for me to run this race to win, to run with purpose and do well, I need the right people around me. You can't go about this thing called life and run this spiritual race on your own. I know it sounds noble, but it's also stupid. Ultimately, God made us as people who belong to each other. And one of the things that I've learned in actual athletics is if I want to do well, I need the right people around me. And I think there are 2 types of people that we need. This is true for actual athletics, but also for our spiritual race. The first one is you need people who support you. People who are behind you, people who encourage you, people who are the fans and the supporters in the stands who say, keep going. People who say, just no, if you're tired of training and you don't want to turn up, people who say, keep going. But you know what? You don't just need people who support you all the time. You also need people of truth, the coaches. People who can look at how you're running and say to you, you know what? Your technique is abysmal. And you need to do something about that, because if you keep running that way, you're not going to win. You need a coach, a person of truth who's willing to tell you, listen, you need to look at your diet, you're getting too fat. You need a coach who's willing to tell you the truth, that look, you're not training enough or you're not recovering enough. You need those people too. See, if you just have people who support you, they might support you in the wrong direction because they love you and they just keep going, keep going. Well, what if you're actually heading towards a cliff? Keep going. It's not the right advice in those times. In our spiritual lives, we need people who support us. You need people right now. I need people right now around us that support us and help us when the race gets tough. Right now, you need good people. But you also need people in your life right now that are willing to tell you the truth about your life. Not in a judgmental manner, but somebody that's willing to push you so that you can push yourself. We need both those type of people. In Proverbs 13:20 it says this: whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of the fools will suffer harm. See, there is a law in this universe called the law of association. We become like those we associate with. That is just how we are as people. You need people who support you, but also people who tell you the truth. You need right people around yourself, people who run the race like you want to run the race. Otherwise, you'll eventually start running with those who don't run the race, or those who run at a slower pace when you need to keep going, when you need to run faster. Powerful principle. So here's the question: who do you surround yourself with right now in your life, in your spiritual race? Who do you surround yourself with? Do they help you, or do they hurt you right now? Because if they're hurting you, you might want to look at those you surround yourself with and find people that can actually help you run better in your spiritual race. Number 5, I need the right equipment. The right equipment, and this is one that I got from a different minister. So I thought I'll bring you some of my equipment, because I see some of you, the All Blacks game is starting to take its toll. So I thought I'd show you some of my equipment, right? So I didn't bring half of it, but this is just for me wanting to run 2 simple races. One is long, 11 seconds long, and the other one is 7 seconds long. That's it. So I'll show you some of the equipment needed for that. So that's okay? Good. Here's the most important one. Water. Hydration. Very important for running. Here's a couple of others. These are some of the supplements I use. Okay? These are all good for joints, for brain power, all those other things. So I take them every day. Probiotics, everything to do with my diet, it's all good. Here's something that I drink every day. Supplements. Pre-workout, post-workout, and night recovery. To get the muscles going. So now that we sorted the diet, here's a little ab wheel. So anyone, wants this? It's for your abs. Just nice, quite sort. This is this one thing. Here's an example. So doing weights, so weight straps when you do heavy like weightlifting and stuff. So there's some straps. Then the actual stuff that you run with, spikes. You just run faster with these than without these. So they say. Anyway, so I've got a few of those. Resistance bands, so here's just one resistance band. So I've got a few of these, just resistance bands, so train with those. And then another one which is very vital is called a stopwatch. You of course want to know how fast you're going. There's no point training really, really hard and then end up realizing that you've become 10 seconds slower. It's no point, you've got to measure yourself. A couple of equipment to help me train well so I can win more of these. A couple of things. Do you know what, guys? When I looked at that this morning, because I just put the bag together, I've left all the other stuff at home. I looked at that. My bag wasn't big enough. So I looked at that, and do you know what I thought? I thought to myself, I'm going to come here and talk to you guys about running a spiritual race. But what would the equivalent of this look like if I had to put another table next to this and actually put the equipment I'm using for my spiritual race next to it? Would there be anything on it? That's a major question. Because I looked at that and I realized there's dollars, there's time, there's effort, going into these things to pay for it and to use it consistently, all these things. But what does my other table look like for my spiritual race? And I realized for myself that if I think about it, my spiritual equipment doesn't even compare to that of what I put in, really, if I'm being honest with myself. Yet I expect to run this race with power and with purpose and run the spiritual race to win. But yet what I put into it is far less. How does that work? Now there's a couple of things that you obviously need to have on your table. And I would say this is a good start. Having one of these on your table, your spiritual race table, is a good start. But you know how many people, Christians, actually spend time with this? I know of many that don't ever really open this or read it. Now, I don't care about, how you read it and stuff, because, it's all different for us as people. But you've got to spend time with this. You've got to spend time with God and prayer. You've got to spend time with the Holy Spirit. You've got to spend time with people that encourage you and, with good teachers and mentors and all that. You've got to do that in order to run your spiritual race to win. Again, when I look at these two, I was blown away by it. And I realized for myself that I need to pick up my game in terms of my spiritual race. Because a lot of time and effort seems to be going to that race. But that one is running for a prize that fades away. The other one runs for a prize that's eternal. Here's my last slide. In the end, I run alone. That's why I love athletics. See, at the end of the day, after you've used yourself and pumped yourself full of all this stuff and had all the water and all the nutrition, you did all the hard work, and you line up, it's you, your hard work, your discipline, you and the goal in front of you. You run on your own. In rugby, I can blame Richie, who was off his game slightly today, so we didn't win. In athletics, if I lose, it's all me. And I thought about this idea in our spiritual race, is that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how tight your unit in your marriage is, it doesn't matter how many times you come to church and how many times you sit next to people, at the end of the day, even though we are a body and we belong together, we run our own race. At the end of the day, you run on your own. And you can't blame anyone else or rely on anyone else for your race, for my race. I'll close with this passage in Romans 14 verse 12. The Apostle Paul talks about this and he says, each of us will ultimately give a personal account to God himself. A personal account. I can't go there and talk about my wife. Can't go there and talk about my kids, unfortunately. That didn't sound right, did it? But I'm going to go there and talk about myself. So at the end of the day, I must run alone. On my own. And I've got to put in the hard yards and the hard work. Guys, that's me.